Hello, everybody. Welcome to Late Nights with Liger and Garrido. We're back with our regular Thursday show. Got some fun stuff to talk about today. We're going to be talking about the Prozac revolution, doing more discussion of the healthcare system, big pharma, the mental health system that we hit on last time from the angle of therapists. This time we're going to dig more into medication and pharmaceuticals and how they're pushed in the US by the largest pharmaceutical companies. Again, every time we talk about this, it doesn't mean we're against medical intervention. And of course, no hard feelings or any hard feelings towards people who use medication and it helps them. But we still have to look at these things systemically and look at how these drugs like opioids and Prozac are being pushed by the Sackler family and the other richest capitalists in the nation. And then we're also going to talk about the infamous, famous and infamous Fresh and Fit podcast, who talk about dating as if it's a market transaction, as if it's a transaction of commodities in the market. So we'll talk about the way that capitalism affects dating a little bit, kind of an interesting topic that we don't usually hit on here, but I think it will lead to some fun discussions and possibly a little bit of virality. So we'll see. But yeah, after we play the intro, we'll jump right into it. Oh, we forgot our George Galloway video. Damn it.
Oh yeah, that would have been great. Yeah, we've been thinking about doing like a somewhat. Or are you talking about the voice thing that we were talking about earlier, or was there another George Galloway video that I sent you?
The one of him talking about Venezuela.
Oh man, yeah, he's such a beast. He's got so many iconic moments. The one where he's defending himself in Congress is amazing. The one where he's in Oxford and someone calls him a racist and he goes off about how he was with Nelson Mandela and was fighting apartheid. Oh my, he's such a legend. But um, yeah, maybe
Ooh,
we
I
could
have
say
the video. You want to play it?
yeah. Let's play it. Let's play it before
All
we
right.
do the intro.
Okay.
He vocally supported the re-election of a man.
Let me know if you can hear it, y'all, because I got my noise canceling headphones on today, so you should be able to hear this. But
He vocally supported the re-election of a man in Venezuela named Hugo Chavez, who frequently shuts down opposition television stations, frequently jails any journalist who criticizes him. Specifically, when Globovision covered prison riots, which Venezuelan prison governors brutally suppressed prisoners, that television was immediately shut down. So where is the freedom of expression and freedom of dissent for Venezuelan opposition leaders? Especially considering Mr. Capriles was never given any television coverage. He was not allowed the oil subsidies that Chavez used to fund his
Enough already. What you just said about Venezuela is so far from the truth. I have to imagine you wandered in here. You're not really a student at Oxford University. You cannot be a student at Oxford University and say what you just said about Venezuela. Hugo Chavez is the most elected politician on the earth. On the earth. He has won more free and fair elections than any politician on the earth. You spoke, let me answer you. Who said so? Jimmy Carter, last week, Jimmy Carter, that well-known Islamist revolutionist, homophobic, misogynistic tyrant, Jimmy Carter described last week's election, which I witnessed and you did not, as the most perfect election he has ever observed, better than any election ever held in the United States. That's what Jimmy Carter said, not me. Hugo Chavez won a landslide victory against 30 opposition parties. You said that Chavez doesn't allow opposition. 30 opposition parties combined to put up one presidential candidate. You said Capriles was never given one television interview. Capriles was never off the television. I was watching him with my own eyes, day in, day out, all the time I was in Venezuela. Don't shake your head. You're talking nonsense. 95% of the television stations in Venezuela are privately owned and supported Capriles. Me and my wife were on the demonstration of hundreds of thousands of opposition supporters supporting Capriles' election campaign. Just last week, you're talking nonsense. Capriles himself has acknowledged that he was defeated in a free and fair election. I've heard of being more Catholic than the Pope. You're more Capriles than Capriles. It's utterly absurd what you're saying. Utterly absurd. And it's a disgrace that you feel that you can say these things with so little knowledge of the true facts. Rich people in Venezuela hate Hugo Chavez because Hugo Chavez has utterly transformed the lot of the poor masses in Venezuela, which is why he keeps getting re-elected. Poverty has been reduced by 75% in the 14 years that Chavez has been in power. He's built 22 universities, making Venezuela the 5th largest student body in the world, in a country of just 26 million people. 98% of Venezuelans now eat 3 meals a day, when nobody even counted how many, because it wouldn't have been worth doing how many ate 3 times a day before the Venezuelan Revolution.
He vocally
Look at this kid. Look at him. Oh, what a brutal.
That was an
Brutal
utter
beatdown.
destruction. He's amazing, man. He's got what in Spanish we would call cojones. Yeah, I think he was he has the record for being the youngest elected Labor Party leader from the beginning of his career as a working class politician. He's just been balls to the wall and a loyal representative of the working class and the cause of socialism and anti-imperialism. But yeah, that video was perhaps a little longer than we expected for a semi introduction to the introduction video. But now we'll roll into our usual.
Wait, no. I
No
wanted to
international?
talk about it a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Well, first I thought that was our intro video, but I wanted to
Oh,
show
yes.
this graph of the Venezuelan media. So fair.org did a study and found that the U.S. corporate media has far less diversity in political opinions than the Venezuelan media, which is, as George Galloway said, largely privately owned, largely pro-U.S., pro-opposition, conservative, owned by billionaires. But still, there's more diversity of political opinions versus in the U.S., they did another study and found that there was not a single outlet, a single journalistic outlet in the entire United States that is against overthrowing the Venezuelan government. So you want to talk about a controlled, muzzled propaganda media. Talk about the media apparatus that is hegemonically calling for the undemocratic and violent overthrow of another country's government. I mean, that is a muzzled propaganda media that would make Joseph Goebbels proud, as Noam Chomsky would say. And this is what Jimmy Carter said. Venezuela's election process is the best in the world after verifying the results. And if you search what Jimmy Carter, the former president, said, this just shows how disgusting Google is and how disgusting the propaganda media is. Jimmy Carter gets it wrong on Venezuela again. He was there, I wasn't there, but he's getting it wrong because he's going against U.S. interests. Like these fucking shameless liars like Jose R. Cardenas who call themselves journalists. And they're just simping for the ruling class, sucking on the teat of the ruling class while putting out this propaganda that helps destroy working class democratic governments like the Bolivarian Revolution, that from its inception has been from the ground up and from the poorest parts of Venezuela, from the most impoverished barrios in the country. And these pampered, rich Western journalists are just willing to throw as much shit as they can at the Venezuelan people and at the Venezuelan revolution to try and get them starved with sanctions, to try and get their government overthrown. so that the people aren't having hospitals, schools, and food brought to them by the government. So I have nothing but contempt for these people, and George Galloway was absolutely right to shout down that little twerp.
We're gonna expropriate that Cardenas fella's last name because half of my family is from the Cardenas part of Cuba. The other half is from Cienfuegos. Um, but yeah, he doesn't deserve that last name. But as Hans Snow mentioned, there's a good Empire Files video with Abby Martin where she's a Venezuelan reading off the newspaper stands, and the vast majority of the papers are uh, owned by the private companies, private monopolies, and they are pro-opposition papers. So if there's a critique that we would make of the Bolivarian revolution so far is that things like that are allowed to continue, where at least in our view, power would be much more secured if you would block out this U.S. imperialist funded opposition media and consolidate more the means of communication, the hegemonic apparatuses that exist in civil society. Because what's their freedom of speech? It's um, the freedom to promote an order where the vast majority of Venezuelans lived in utter degradation and poverty, exploited and oppressed. A freedom to sell out their homeland to the U.S. and multinational corporations. That's no freedom at all. That's in contradiction to the freedoms of the people, in contradiction to the freedom of the nation to self determine itself and to have autonomy and sovereignty. So, um, if we'd have a critique, it'd be that the process of carrying forth the dictatorship of the proletariat hasn't so far gone far enough. But there's still a lot to learn from Venezuela, nonetheless.
Absolutely. All right, now we can play the international.
injustice and economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power.
All right. That was a great way to start the show today.
That's like our equivalent of what the national anthem is for Joey Diaz. As soon as I hear the international playing, boy, I'm up and running.
You bet. Yeah, today we've got some interesting videos. I don't know. Our plans were to only stream for an hour, but we'll see what happens.
Do we want to, before we get to the first video, do we want to answer this question here by
Yeah.
Adam Duvall, Opinions on Marxism, Leninism, Maoism? Do you want to tackle that first, or you want me to say a few things on it?
Yeah, you can. Here, you go first, and then I'll follow up. Actually, I was talking about this with some folks in the Discord earlier.
Yeah, so I'm much more sympathetic to Marxism, Leninism, Mao Zedong thought, and then all the stuff that comes after Deng Xiaoping theory and Xi Jinping thought. With social, there's a bunch of different names that come after that are based on the different theoretical innovations to Marxism in the context of China that have been made by subsequent Chinese leaders after Mao. The problem with Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, which is really what we would call shorthand Maoism, it's that it reverts back to a form of Marxism that predominated during the Cultural Revolution, which fell into dogmatism. It fell deeply into dogmatism. It aligned itself with a form of book worshipping, of Mao's books and his writings and speeches. When part of the essence of Marxism is development and the realization that you can't copy and paste the conclusion from one area to another because the context is different. And Mao himself, he's got the short little article against book worshipping. So these were all things that, in the name of following Mao, in the name of Maoism, they participated in practices and forms of thinking that were, in my view at least, in contradiction with the soul of not just Marxism-Leninism, but of Marxism-Leninism and the advancements that Mao had made up until that point in the Chinese context. And so I see the battle that's then waged against, the Gang of Four and these more dogmatic tendencies that existed within the CPC. I see that battle against those labeling themselves Maoism or Maoists as the ones that are actually embodying the spirit of Mao and Marxism Leninism, and then developing it further, right? Because if it stays where it's at, if it stays in those conclusions, it's dead, right? You're engaging with something else that's not actually Marxism Leninism or Mao Zedong's thought. So those would be my 2 cents. I think you're
Sorry, I
muted.
had myself muted. Yeah, I just see this taking a really dogmatic form. And I like the distinction between Mao Zedong thought and Maoism, because a lot of the modern Maoists or Maoist third worldists, you read Mao and I just feel like he would disagree with a lot of what they said because he was such a dialectical thinker. And he was such a materialist. So like this dogmatic approach. And I mean, he was a great figure, and the party leaned on him so much they just kind of got used to, leaning on him to the point where it became a little dogmatic. But someone sent this in the Discord, and like, I think this video pretty well sums up American Maoists, not Mao Zedong thought, but this is how a lot of American Maoists act and portray themselves.
The unique of it, that's what we're Maoists. We make a critique of it in order to improve socialism the next time it comes around and throws people like your ass into a labor camp.
So like you had the Shining Path in Peru, who were extremely violent and basically engaging in terrorist activity and killing anyone who wouldn't follow along with their idea of cultural revolution and their, dogmatic idea of socialism. And a lot of these people base themselves in the Shining Path as leader, Gonzalo. They also followed Gonzalo thought, which is also pretty dogmatic and just, this is not going to lead us to socialism, right? This is not going to organize the workers going around in New York and telling them that you're going to throw them in a labor camp if they don't follow your version of socialism, right? It's just kind of silly, and it's like a meme, which is honestly what a lot of modern MLMs in America are, in my opinion.
Maoism in that time, it got really big in France too. The French Maoists were a whole thing, and a lot of the most cringe of the French so-called Marxist theorists or so-called radical theorists, people like Alain Badiou and Michel Foucault, that are connected as former students or students of Althusser, and some of them developers of what we now call postmodernism. They self-styled themselves for a very long time as French Maoists, as Maoists. And in that time, we're very much very supportive of China. And in many ways, we see China today as like the beacon of socialism and world peace and humanity, really. But in that time, it was kind of hard to defend some of the things that China was doing internationally. It was unfortunately supporting apartheid in South Africa and in other places of Africa when Cuba and the USSR were sending weapons and men to defend the national liberation struggles. We talked about that a little bit with Dr. Montero yesterday. Um, yeah, it's it was pushing this line that both the USSR uh, and the US were imperialists, and in certain places, it's even suggested that the USSR was worse. And I think that's a whole big mess. And the tradition of Marxism Leninism that we sort of grow out of, the one that's tied to the Communist Party and figures like Henry Winston, Gus Hall, and a few others, they're extremely critical of China in that time. And it's very unfortunate that they took that route. Carlos Martinez, in the book he published with our publishing press, No Great Wall, and also in the new one that just came out in Britain, which is called The East is Still Red, Chinese Socialism in the 21st Century, that we're going to be doing a book launch for late July. But in that book, he mentions that, there's basically this compromise that China makes in order to allow itself to develop, you know, and in part of what's gained in that process of opening up is the fact that imperialism stops fucking with you. So it's while the USSR is spending a whole lot of resources defending countries from imperialism, China didn't necessarily have to do that for at least a couple decades. That's not to say that they weren't um, attacked in other ways by imperialism and looted and expropriated and um, you know they were still an imperialized country, but some of their foreign policies position allowed them to exist more peacefully in ways in which the USSR was never able to. It always had to give a whole lot of resources to trying to catch up to the military attacks and developments of the US and defending the peoples of the world against American imperialism.
Yeah, and I mean China's current policy, like I don't agree with their theory of Soviet social imperialism, obviously, but their current policy of complete non-interventionism and win-win trade relations or trade relations based on mutual development kind of evolved out of that. You know, they were
Yeah,
getting too involved in these making these foreign policy mistakes. So they're like, we're just gonna be completely non-interventionist. The right to self-determination, you know, which we respect, means we're not going to touch countries' politics at all. And obviously, you know, by trading with countries and by developing industry in countries, you're gaining influence, right? Countries are going to be more likely to work with you than they are with the US, but it's still a lot different than manipulating their politics or doing what the IMF and the World Bank do with their structural adjustment loans, where they say, we'll finance you, but there's political strings attached. You have to
yeah,
get rid of your minimum wage and get rid of the unions and allow us to extract your resources for free, or we'll trap you in debt. So it's almost like a dialectical development of China's foreign policy there. From that, those mistakes that they made, they learned, and
right.
now have the most anti-imperialist advanced foreign policy in the history of socialism that's changing the world and moving us toward multipolarity. So
Right. It's I mean I describe it in the book as helping us enter a post-Columbian age, because now I
yeah.
think it's very clear to anyone seeing it that the dynamics that have that have shaped global power struggles since 1492, which have been dominated in Europe, are now moving eastward in ways in which it wasn't necessarily the case. It was almost the case with the Soviet Union, but it wasn't necessarily the case. And I think it's very clearly the case now with China. So that's yeah, full support of China, but there are moments there that are that are difficult to defend. Um,
what, you don't support Pol Pot?
yeah, the relations with Vietnam and
That's
Cambodia.
always been a thing, though. That's based in the history of the two countries. Like
Right.
even today, people think this is bizarre, but like 75% of Vietnamese people support the U.S. and less than 50% support China. It's like the U.S. dropped tons of Agent Orange and napalm on them years ago, but they, like Ho Chi Minh, you know, even had an affinity for the U.S. and the U.S. Constitution. And he
Yeah.
called upon the U.S. in their anti-colonial struggle. Vietnam's always kind of had this affinity for the U.S. and then a beef with China. But
But they're moving closer now.
yeah,
The parties are moving closer. The leaderships are moving closer. I think that will ripple into the people as well. And just to mention something real quick before we thank Sam, um, it's China's got non-interventionism, of course, in its trades, and there was moments in the past where its trades with Saudi Arabia and stuff were a little icky to talk about. But look at what has came out of it. The complete opposite of what comes out of trades with these countries with the U.S. Saudi Arabia has pledged to stop waging its genocidal war on Yemen, and then has reestablished relations with Iran, and the all of that thanks to China, right? So it takes the ugly, and with time makes it prettier, and it's the largest force for good in humanity right now. The good for humanity right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and thank you, Sam, for the super chat. BRB getting capitalism is life-devouring tatted. That's a great tattoo. I like it. I just noticed this. If you read G, he's really focused on pushing socialism forward the world. He absolutely is. And actually, I saw on Twitter the other day, a Maoist posted Xi and said, "Does anyone actually read these? Or read this revisionist garbage?" And then I saw a whole bunch of Midwestern Marx people responding and being like, "Yeah, I read that." And yeah, and here he details, and this was one of the very, very first Marxist or socialist books I ever read, but he details China's foreign policy, their approach to foreign policy, and this approach of mutual development and complete non-interventionism and win-win trade relations, that they're even willing to, there's an open door policy for the U.S. and West Europe. China's saying, trade with us, we join BRICS if you want. They've got an open door to the U.S. The U.S. just continues to try and sanction them and contain them while pretending China's the evil one, China's the aggressor. But if you read G, you see how ridiculous that is, and he lays down the most advanced foreign policy or trade policy in the history of the world or the history of socialism. So I agree that he's focused on pushing socialism forward in the world. And I also recommend people read Mao, though. Mao is still extremely relevant. There it is. Mao himself is in the chat. How's it going, Mao? How can Westerners embrace Mao Zedong thought if MZT only applies to China, not the West? So it's not that it only applies to China, right? Mao obviously was applying socialism to Chinese conditions, but there's still things that we can glean from that, right? Not everything. Like, it's not just a blueprint, a roadmap that we can just copy and implement here, because every struggle takes a unique national form. But there's so many things that we can learn from Mao and how he organized, and how the revolution went, especially how they were able to consolidate support of the people after the revolution. So that's what they mean by Mao Zedong thought. Like, we don't just support Maoism full stop or think that we should apply everything Mao said in the U.S. We should pick and choose what is applicable for our conditions today. That's the distinction between Mao Zedong thought and Maoism. And if you like I said, if you read Mao, you'll see how relevant it is. And I believe you'll also see, like, I have a bunch of notes in my copy of the Little Red Book that say Mao would have disagreed with modern Maoists, because he takes positions that are so dialectical and constantly changing, and he's always open to new ideas, the opposite of a lot of the dogmatism you see from Maoists in the West today. So yeah, I still recommend people read Mao. He's one of my favorites, especially On Contradiction. Is such a good book for understanding dialectics, and it adds this theory of non-principal contradiction, right, Carlos?
Right. It develops on a few categories. So, like Lenin, it develops a category of antagonistic contradiction and a regular contradiction, non-antagonistic contradiction, which is kind of already in Lenin. But then it also develops on principal and secondary contradiction and principal and secondary aspect of a contradiction, which is just absolutely brilliant. I talk about it as a genuine development of dialectical thought in general my anthology on dialectical materialism. So yeah, I think everything you said is absolutely correct. It's the same thing that someone brought up Juche, I think, last stream. It's like we should study it and learn how it is that they were able to apply Marxism Leninism to their context and see what sort of seeds we can learn. But we can't like copy and paste what they did, because what they did is for their context. And if you understand what they did, you would also understand that what we need to do is not copy and paste what they're doing, but do what they did for their context for ours.
Absolutely. This is an interesting super chat here from Lemonheads. Thank you. Do you foresee the U.S. opening borders with Mexico and California? I don't know. When I was talking with our buddy Diego Rusarin the other day, I realized I need to study Mexico more because, everything we do impacts them. And as we move into the era of multipolarity, everything they do is going to start to impact us. But I looked at a map of Mexico and California for the first time earlier this year, and I don't know, for whatever reason, I just didn't really understand how it looked or like how everything was laid out. But if you've never been to California, like Tijuana, Mexico is right here, right? And San Diego is right here. They're basically the same city. Um, so it does make sense that, I don't know about opening the border, but at least having trade between these countries. And especially when you have all this drug trafficking going on, it makes sense that the U.S. would want to work together with Mexico's government to shut that down. But the DEA and the U.S.'s drug enforcement policies have constantly been used as tools of imperialism in Colombia and other places in Latin America. And now they're threatening to invade Mexico to shut down the drug cartels. So rather than having what would make perfect sense is, a win-win trade relationship, a trade relationship based on mutual development, especially because Mexico has a lot of valuable natural resources. Instead of that, the U.S. is taking the imperialist, belligerent, bully stance that they take with everyone and saying, give us everything you have, otherwise we're going to invade. Give us your lithium. And it just like, when I explained this to one of my wrestlers, he always does a good job at putting it in human terms. He's like, China seems like they're just like a nice guy. Like if, they want to trade with everyone, they want to do this. And the U.S. is just a bully on the global stage, right? We want your resources, give them to us or we're going to invade. Whereas China is like, we'll help you develop industry in your country. We'll help you bring jobs. It's just like if you think of the different countries as people interacting with each other, the way the U.S. is acting is so stupid and so belligerent and just like an arrogant dick. So yeah, I don't foresee them opening the borders, I guess, until the U.S. has a less imperialistic, belligerent government, which I don't foresee happening soon.
Yeah, and the border thing is difficult because it's an integral component of the formation of bourgeois nationhood, right? Um, and I think it might begin to dissolve with the overcoming of bourgeois society. And um, but it's like the topic that we were talking about um, on Angela Davis and prison abolition. Like it's in many ways it's good, but in some other ways it's like it's very uh, it takes what should be a long-term goal that's connected to many developments that should precede it in order for it to even be possible, and it makes it like an immediate thing of struggle. And I think parts of the left, like I've seen, I think Haymarket and other more rad lib socialist organizations in the US, they have like slogans like no bosses, no binaries, no borders. Like the no borders, like the sentiment is like anti-nationalist and uh, maybe at a very advanced stage of socialism, but you know these borders are like an integral part of bourgeois nationhood. And I think the position that Bernie took with respect to like the immediate problem of the border, of like a comprehensive way of approaching it, I think it's largely correct, at least for what we can do now. And remember, of course, that the 99.99% of the reasons behind people fleeing their country are tied to what U.S. imperialism has done in them. So if you want to, as often people on the right say, like regulate the issue of immigration, like what you have to be focusing on is not the people in the border, but the countries that your country has helped to overthrow and to keep in poverty and to allow crime to grow rampant and all of these horrific things, or to promote crime, as in Colombia, where and Honduras for a while, and Nicaragua before the Sandinistas came back. All of these were crime-ridden countries with poverty and with horrific conditions that were imposed by U.S. imperialism, and that's what makes people flee their home. No one wants to flee where they grew up. It's imperialism that creates those conditions, and um, yeah,
Yeah. And historically, the diaspora of any country tends to be in the country that colonized them. Like there are a ton of Algerian people in France who fled there during the War of Algiers because it makes sense if you think about it. If your nation is being colonized by this wealthy, powerful nation, it makes sense that you would want to go to the wealthy, powerful nation where you're safe, where you're going to be protected, rather than the vulnerable country. Also, I
and
love every time I look at Google Earth, it just makes me want to visit all of these national parks. But that's just a side note.
yeah, they look so nice, man. Um, but I want to just address real quick Shaya Batshivi's question. What about the history of Black Maoism in the U.S.? Um, Yeah, there was some militant Maoism here in the U.S., not as broad as it was in France, but you had figures like Harry Haywood that came out of the Communist Party and then went down the path of Marxism, Leninism, Maoism. And later on in his life, he would condemn some of the positions that China took, specifically with regards to the USSR and the social imperialist thesis and the attacks on the USSR. But in general, he lived a great life and was a great revolutionary in many ways, especially early on in his life. But he ended up wanting to sustain the thesis of the black belt being its own nation and the capacity for certain forms of national liberation struggles in the U.S. at a time when conditions had changed, because you had the Great Migration and black people left the South and um, were dispersed around the country, and parts of the thesis just didn't apply anymore. And the party that had was the one that put forth the thesis, and it ran presidential campaigns from some of its first presidential campaigns on the thesis of the black belt. It realized, pretty soon that it was not possible, and figures like Harry Haywood, that were more in line with this form of Maoism, would end up wanting to sustain that thesis. And the tradition that we connect ourselves to, Henry Winston, William Patterson, um, Gus Hall, and others, they went away from that thesis with time.
Yeah, it's good to know the history of the party, and we're really familiarizing ourselves with our own history, the American history, and the history of class struggle and socialist struggle. And it's really helpful in understanding a lot of these different trends. Um, like we were talking with Montero, and like he knows the revolutionary credentials of a lot of these people, a lot of these pundits and figures, who are going on podcasts or writing books, and might be older than us, which gives them sort of an air of authority. But he knows what they've done on the ground for the most part. He doesn't have an encyclopedic knowledge, but that gives you an idea of what these sort of trends, specific trends, have been doing in the U.S. over the last 100 years, and helps you understand them today. Yeah. I also, I wanted to pull that one up too.
Yeah. So the same thing that basically that we said uh, in one of our last streams about Jucha, and today about Marxism, Leninism, Mao Zedong thought, and all the other different thoughts and theories that come afterwards, is what we would say to Ho Chi Minh thought, which is that it's a creative theoretical innovation that evolves out of the revolutionary practice in Vietnam, and that it's I would consider it to be Marxism-Leninism applied to the conditions, the unique conditions of Vietnam, and there's a whole lot to learn from it, and we must consider in ways in which a lot of the Western left and Western Marxists don't. We must consider Ho Chi Minh to be a genuine theoretical innovator of Marxism, not just someone who was a revolutionary or was involved in practice. He developed Marxism by applying it to the conditions of Vietnam, and there's a whole lot to learn. In the same way that there's a whole lot to learn about the application of Marxism in Cuba and Korea and China and every other place it's been applied in. If you want to learn more about that, this is one of the questions that we asked Vijay Prashad in our interview with him, which was shortly after he published his selected Ho Chi Minh book sometime last year, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, when people say Mao didn't write theory or Stalin or Deng or Xi Jinping didn't write theory, for me that's just a misunderstanding and not the same understanding that I have of what Marxism is. Because Marxism is about what's real, what's material, what can be observed, and the construction of socialism, or I mean, these people who were engaged in trying to construct socialism, like their experiences and what they learned in that process is invaluable theory. I mean, Lenin defined theory as just the experience of the working class taken in general. So these working class governments trying to construct socialism have invaluable things to share about their experiences. So Ho Chi Minh, Stalin, Mao, Kim Il-sung, they're all worth reading. And there's no one-size-fits-all blueprint, like we said. But once you read different thinkers and different revolutionaries from different countries, you see the differences in their thought based on the different nations that they're applying their thought in, or the different conditions of their people, the different historical time periods, different levels of industrial development. So you see how they're able to think dialectically and apply the Marxist method to their own countries.
Yeah, Ho Chi Minh's poetry is great, and so was Mao's. Mao's poetry is really they're both so much better than Marx's. Marx's poetry was ass. It was done when he was super young. He thought he was a poet, but he only had like one poem published when he was in his early 20s. But yeah, they sublated Marx in poetry as well.
I've heard that Mao's poetry is much, much better if you speak the language, though.
Yeah.
I've heard it doesn't really translate the same, but it's amazing. I took a poetry class in college. I loved it, dude. I wrote some hilarious poems. What I realized with poetry is you can't like try and be a poet or more advanced than you are. You just have to speak from like the heart, and just be yourself. So once I started doing like funny poems, everyone loved them, and I started getting A's. I did one about falling down the Niagara River, but you get the rhythm of. And it's actually kind of fun to like read the poetry. I was surprised how into it I was getting. But
it's a form of rap, right? And rap is so central to our culture. I loved rapping when I was younger, and I would try to write some lines, and that's basically a form of poetry. It's like sung poetry. Marx's romantic stuff wasn't that bad, and if you read his letters to Jenny, they're like super cute. It's good if you have a partner, just switch Jenny's name for your partner's name, and just copy just plagiarize Marx and send them the poem. Don't tell them that you're plagiarizing. Tell them that's your own writing. I'm joking. But yeah, the Chinese are such a poetic people. You see it in the metaphors that they use. Like there's one that always sticks out, which is leading a large country is as delicate as frying a small fish. Like, how do you come up with that? Like, it's so brilliant, the metaphors, and it's so true. They're like, at least they seem to be very much connected to providing a really good image that has a very important, substantial message behind it.
Absolutely. We need more socialist art in poetry, though.
100%.
Montero made such a great point that our generation hasn't produced great art yet. And,
yeah.
I might disagree with that slightly. there might be a generational divide there, but as far as like revolutionary art, I agree. I wanted to show him our friend Artsy Marxist, because they've done some art that I think is really great, but they liked the tweet that was negative about us earlier, so I'm canceling them forever, and I'll never shout out their incredible artwork. Just kidding. Go follow Artsy Marxist. I don't care if they hate us or not. Something else that we should bring up before we get into any of our videos for today,
Yes.
is this article that we finally did. And please, if you have liked, commented, or shared any of our Midwestern Marx articles, our printed articles, let it be this one. Give this one a share if you can. This is about the censorship that we've faced. It's about censorship in general, and we make the theoretical argument that there can never be true freedom of speech or freedom of debate and expression under capitalism, because capitalists will always censor dissenting voices, and they'll always control the production of information. But it also details all the times that our TikTok accounts have been banned, how many followers we had when they got banned, and all of the NATO operatives, State Department officials, and U.S. intelligence operatives who work at TikTok. So this fully fleshes out, gives a systematic analysis of us getting censored. And if we can get this to get shared around, it would be extremely helpful for the project. It'd be extremely helpful if we could get on a show like, say, Kyle Kalinske or Jimmy Dore, where they defend leftists or socialists, oftentimes who get censored. So we know that these free speech warriors on the right, like Ben Shapiro and Steven Crowder, are just grifters. They're not going to stand up for a Marxist website, but there are bigger creators who would be cool to get this article in the hands of, and just anyone in general, so they know what happened. And they can be on the lookout and also follow our new platforms if they were one of the 400,000 TikTok followers that we had wiped off the face of the earth.
Right. Yeah. I think it's a great article, and it's the first collaborative project that you, me, and Noah have done. You and me have written, I think, 2 or 3 articles in the past. I think all of them have actually been for the International magazine. But yeah, I think it's, one of the points that we drive home there is that there's often a contradiction in freedoms, and the freedom of the people to search and proliferate the truth, which always leans towards revolutionary conclusions, is in contradiction with the freedom of the bourgeoisie to censor and misinform and lie and deceive people. And insofar as this order that's completely dominated by the capitalist, imperialist class at its highest stage continues the way that it is, the dominant forms of intercourse will make a genuine freedom of speech, which I consider to be, intimately tied to spreading truth, proliferating truth, and not just proliferating deception and lies and misinformation. Under the guise of fighting misinformation, you are the largest misinformers, the people that invent a reality that's always a backwards, distorted version of what the actual world is. So those are things that are important to keep in mind, because we have to bring a class analysis to this question of censorship and understand, like, what are the social conditions which make censorship necessary? Why is the censored speech censored? Who does it uplift? Who does it bring down? What's the interest of the censors in censoring the censored speech? Right? All of these questions have to be asked, because it's not just this vague censorship that stems out of a void. It has a determinate content. And the content is that the people censored are censored because they're speaking truth to power. And the people censoring in the name of fighting misinformation, misinform and censor the truth. It's a fight of truth against power, and we have to understand that, because we're not going to overcome that censorship in ways in which some libertarians might think. We're not going to overcome that unless we change the conditions that make that censorship necessary.
Yeah, I hate how their new strategy, and maybe this isn't a new strategy, but they call anything truthful misinformation or conspiracy. And it just creates this like twilight zone, as you call it, the topsy-turvy world, where it's, you know, an inverted reality. Everything's upside down. What's true is considered misinfo, and what's complete propaganda, lies in favor of war, is considered truth, or the hegemonic mainstream narrative. And what we detail a specific example in this, like when TikTok deleted our account as well as 300,000 other accounts, they said it was Russian propaganda, Russian misinformation. Yet they allowed accounts like Philip DeFranco to stay up, as well as a bunch of people who doxed us. But when it came to the Nord Stream pipeline, Philip DeFranco and I got into a back and forth, or I responded to his video. He said that Russia blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. And then anybody who disagreed with him in his comments, he was calling a Putin propagandist, spreading misinformation, right? So it later turned out that we were correct. I made a video saying, no, all the evidence points to the Biden administration sabotaging Nord Stream. Later, we get the Seymour Hersh article, and it turns out we're correct, but our account gets banned. Our videos get wiped out that we're telling the truth. And Philip DeFranco's video is still up to this day with thousands of views. His comments calling people Putin propagandists for telling the truth are still up. And it's just blatant misinformation. So where is Oracle, the company that owns TikTok and has all these NATO operatives working for them? Where are they when there's misinformation that serves their narrative? Where are they when there's misinformation that serves their interest? They're nowhere to be seen, of course. I mean, we expect this, but it's still so gross to hear them, you know, call people misinformation when they are the biggest purveyors of misinformation on the planet. Bellingcat, this arm of the NED, basically the propaganda arm of the State Department and the NED, they're constantly saying that people are accusing other people of spreading misinformation. It's like, that's your whole fucking job, Elliot Higgins and Bellingcat. Your whole purpose is to spread misinformation and get people killed and get their country's resources stolen by shareholders in the U.S. Yeah.
I call them vegan butchers because they preach veganism, but they're the ones that are doing the killing that they claim to hate. They're the misinformers that they claim to be fighting against. We must remember what Lenin said. Freedom of speech under capitalism means the freedom of the bourgeoisie to deceive the mass of people. We must always ask when we hear these words, freedom or democracy, for whom and to do what? Those questions should always come. I call those the Leninist questions. We should always have those Leninist questions there when we hear those terms. What we have special in our country is that we have a constitution that says that we have a right to freedom of speech, freedom of media, freedom of assemblage. And we have to use that contradiction that we see between the repression of people like the African People's Socialist Party that are indicted on trumped up BS charges of being connected to Russia, the basically torturous conditions that they're holding Julian Assange in because he spoke truth to power, the censorship of Project Right Now, like RBN, that had I think a week. They had to take a week off because they showed a video on something about COVID. Projects like ours that have had 7 accounts banned in the most popular social media platform in the country. You know, all of that is in glaring contradiction to the rights that this country is supposed to uphold, right? The rights that supposedly mark what is special, unique about this country that was supposed to be, you know, the example on the hill. And so I think a lot of the American people agree with those constitutional rights. And if we can show them, like, here are the contradictions, here's why they exist. If you really want these rights, the right to proliferate truth, to search for it, to talk about it openly, and to fight for truth and justice, you need to overthrow the existing system, because truth, justice, freedom, democracy, all of these things are tied to capital, it's the freedom of capital, the freedom of exploitation, the freedom of oppression. That's what we have in the existing order. And it'll only be that insofar as the working class is not in power.
Yep. Cobra, I just did that movie review of District 9. I've actually written an essay for school about the Black Mirror episode. I think you're referring to Men Against Fire. where the troops put on glasses that turns the enemy into monsters. That would be a good one to review for Marxist movie reviews. But yeah, Black Mirror is a really thought-provoking show, and I recommend, if you haven't, check out the Men Against Fire episode. It's good. Don't watch the first episode of Black Mirror if you've never seen it. Don't watch season 1, episode 1. Just start with a different episode, and then come back to season 1, episode 1.
I remember Dr. Dar had us watch that for his class.
Yeah, that's I wrote the essay for. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a article that we're going to be talking to Gabriel Rockhill and Jennifer Ponce de Leon about on the theory of the compositional model of ideology, and they have a really good analysis of that episode in there as well.
That's awesome. I might do that next. Check out the District 9 review I finished today.
It's so good, guys. Please check it out. It's really good. I had to stop it at that moment where you said spoiler alert's about to come, because I still want to watch it with my wife. Hopefully tonight if we're not too tired. But I want to watch the movie and then go back and finish the whole review.
For sure. Definitely give it a watch. And yeah, let me know if there's anything else that you catch or that you wanted to add, because it's such a good movie and there's so much symbolism. Like, I'm sure I missed a bunch of smaller little details. So yeah, I want to do more movie reviews in the future. It seems like people are reacting to that well. It's just not as lucrative as streaming, and we have to make sure that we make enough money to survive. But the more of those movie reviews that I can do, I feel like the better, or the more that I want to do. This is a Ho Chi Minh sampler, by the way. This is from Ho Chi Minh's poetry, I believe. Going with us, guards carry a pig on their shoulders, while I'm dragged along rudely. A man is treated worse than a pig, once deprived of his liberty. Speaking of Black Mirror, season 1, episode 1.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it's a great little line there.
That reminds me of a quote from somewhere in Marx. I think it was the younger Marx, where he brought up a quote, poor dogs are being treated as Irish. He was talking about the dogs in England, when they mistreat a dog, poor dogs are being treated as the Irish. Yeah, he was such a courageous man. And if you look at the history of the repression that they faced and the people that were killed, and it's similar in most other countries that have fought for socialism, the ones that have succeeded and the ones that haven't. But there's been so many sacrifices, so many people that have given their lives, that have made it their life's purpose to see socialism in their country and worldwide. And we're really, the fight that we're waging on is not just for the future, it's for the redemption of the past. It's so that all of those people that died, so that we make sure that their lives didn't go in vain. And there's many of them in our country, and of course many around the world. And it's a wonderful fight that we're in, and it's the best purpose that you can give your life. The most meaningful thing you can do as a human being is fight for freedom and for the emancipation of humanity, and make that your life's project, and be content with even if you don't win in your lifetime, making sure that the next generations are closer to it thanks to your efforts.
For sure. Yeah, it's a great way to put it. Before we should probably move on to our Prozac video, but before we do, when are you going to do the movie review of Her, Carlos, or do you want to do one together? Because that's one of my favorite sci-fi movies ever.
I want to rewatch it, because I only saw it once, and I kept on pausing it to talk to my wife about the messaging and what's funny is that the things that I was pointing at are then brought up at the end of the movie. So it was pretty cool when those things came up, to tell my wife, you see, I told you this was going to come up. And I've never seen it. So I want to watch it again, and then I think I'd like to record it with the iPhone. I have one of the older versions, but the quality is still good. And I think if you could do one like that and we can mix the clips, hopefully we can try to get our designer hat on add clips from the movie, do something special. Um, that it makes it the sort of thing that people might want to share with friends, relatives, or on social media.
Yeah, I have an idea actually. If we record it in, we can talk about this later, but if we record it in StreamYard, we can both be on here and communicate. And then I can just take the raw MP4 and edit it and put those clips in and make it like an edited video. So I think people would like that too.
I was thinking, because I've done this before. I had a small philosophy channel a very, very long time ago.
Tu
But like,
esquina filosófica.
oh no, I've been trying to hide it because I have like horrible Hegel videos on there. Um, Before I had actually like read substantially, but the one of the things that I did was like this little mic that I think I still have. You put on a mic and you could just record wherever you go. So I was like doing videos at a park and mixing stuff. So I was thinking that if I can find locations that look kind of like parts in the movie, that I can give it analysis, in a way similar to how Zizek does in the Sublime Object of Cinema, or whatever is a Pervert's Guide to Ideology, where he literally like jumps into like the scene, and it's the most hilarious thing ever. Like he's analyzing Titanic and he's like drowning. He sticks us. I hate him politically, but those movies are fun to watch and they're hilarious because he just jumps into the scene at a very intimate moment and just starts like talking. So I want to see if I can try to do some of that. And yeah, but if I think it's too hard of a project, I'll just settle for the camera stuff.
For sure. Yeah, some of the movie reviews online are like they have like sketch comedy and they're just like really well done. Thank you so much, Molly McGuire. Huge $10 super chat. Beautifully said, Carlos.
Thank you, Molly.
Appreciate you, Molly. Constant support. Zizek is only good for comedy. His joke book was his finest work. Yeah. I saw a video from Zizek today that said why Lenin wasn't a Marxist. I'm like, says fucking you, dude. Says you, and just talking and making a whole bunch of money talking about movies in your ivory freaking tower. But the guy who, improved the standard of living for millions and millions of Soviets and then, founded the country that defeated the Nazis, that wouldn't have been able to defeat the Nazis without socialism. He's not a real Marxist. The real Marxist is the people who sit in their ivory tower and just give interviews all day about movies.
And he calls himself a Leninist too, which is
oh my
god. Yeah. Oh, don't get me started. Sam, what quote are you talking about? I wonder let me know what quote are you talking about and I'll tell you where it's from. But do you remember what quote did I give earlier?
I can't think of it now. What did you say? Was it? I don't know. They'll let us know. I swear we're gonna move on to the Prozac video now, but since we're talking about Lenin and poetry, and we talked to Anthony Montero yesterday, who's been teaching us all about art, and James Baldwin, the great essayist, and a lot of the great Black thinkers and artists in American history. Langston Hughes has a poem about Lenin that I read once for a socialist night school event that Carlos and I used to hold. And it's so good. I got so into it. I remember reading the poem because it was so hype. So yeah, check that out. And this is the kind of stuff that's, hidden from history. They act like anybody who supports Lenin or Stalin or whatever is crazy. But then if you look at the greatest, intellectuals and human beings in American history, Albert Einstein, Langston Hughes, Paul Robeson, they all support socialism. And most of them were tankies. Right. So the Khrushchev's secret speech might have changed that a little bit for them, but for the most part, they also still support socialism in the USSR till the end. So don't let them gaslight you.
Comrade Charles is watching. He says, "What about Comrade Pablo Picasso?" Yes, his Guernica was, it was done during the Spanish Civil War, if I'm not mistaken, and it was packaged up in such a way that it could be shipped around the world. And it was shipped around the world in order to inspire national liberation struggles against imperialism and colonialism and neocolonialism. And yeah, he was another comrade. There's a story that they asked him, um, uh, why did you paint this? Or so they asked him, like, why would you paint such a hideous thing? I'm butchering the quote, and he tells the person who was a part of the fascist government, no, you guys did this. Like, you guys were the one that led to this. And that's a very almost self-conscious form of art, which realizes that artistic productions are productions of the social conditions in which the artist is in.
For sure. That's the Marxist way to understand it. All right, let's jump into this Prozac video. This is from the New York Times. It's called Prozac Revolution in a Capsule. It reminds me of a 1994 book called Prozac Nation. I believe that was 1994. Yeah, there are some. I don't know if this will show the Prozac commercials, but they were literally advertising Prozac in the 80s and 90s, or late 80s, early 90s as like happiness in a pill. And just this one pill will take all of your problems away. It'll take all your symptoms away, which is what a lot of big pharma's medication does. Is it's psychoactive medicine that helps you either hyper focus, like the amphetamines you get, or it takes all the pain away, like Prozac or some of the opioids that they prescribe. So again, I always like to say, because there's always someone who brings it up, nothing, absolutely nothing against anyone who takes any psychoactive medicine and it helps them. It helps them function in life and have a better quality of life. You know, and we're not against that. What we're trying to do is look at how our mental health care and how our health system is structured from a systemic level. And then, you know, we have to make analyses of how the pharmaceutical companies are pushing medication that may be harmful to a lot of people in order to make a profit, like the opioids and stuff. So this isn't to make anyone feel bad or to shame anybody or to say there's no value to this medication. This is just to give a systematic analysis of the healthcare system and look at some of the ways in which it's messed up. And, you know, and oftentimes that includes medication. So, yeah, this is last time we talked about a therapist who had left the industry because he felt like the way mental health care is structured is so messed up. And now we're looking at Prozac Revolution in a Capsule. Carlos has seen this. I have not.
It's the hottest psychiatric drug in history.
Prozac.
Prozac, a wonder drug that works wonders.
At the end of 1987, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved a new antidepressant, and Prozac hit the American market. Advertising and word of mouth helped boost the drug's reputation, and Prozac became the it drug of the 1990s.
Models in the latest fashions are said to look Prozac deprived.
Before long, the name was on everyone's tongue.
I was on Prozac for a long time.
And it seemed everyone was using it.
6 million Americans using Prozac right now.
The greater the drug's popularity, the more it seemed to symbolize.
Prozac moves from being a successfully launched pharmaceutical product to being a true cultural celebrity.
You know, it's the holiday season in New York City when the drug dealers are selling more Prozac than crack.
So how did this little pill become the icon of an era?
For people who suffer depression, it's been hailed as a virtual miracle.
Almost immediately after Prozac's launch, it was clear that it offered a promising alternative to available treatments for depression.
I started giving it to difficult patients who hadn't done well somewhere else, and people thought I could get help with something I've lived with for years.
The drug was an enormous medical breakthrough. Prozac emerged as a pioneer in a new category of drugs called SSRIs that targeted one chemical in the brain, serotonin, instead of many.
It plays a crucial role.
So I think this is where we should point out the article that Carlos did analyzing the serotonin theory of depression that's been accepted by the mental health care industry for a long time. So they've all based their treatment and their care and their medication like Prozac on this theory that depression and other mental health issues happen because of a chemical imbalance in the brain, particularly low levels of serotonin. So what's the answer then? To give medication that increases serotonin. But what the studies have found, and now a meta-analysis of all the studies on this, is that there's absolutely no evidence for this. There's no evidence that depressed people have a chemical imbalance in the brain. And in fact, depression can stem from all sorts of factors, especially environmental factors, life factors, overwork, stress, things like this. But as we always say, the mental health system has no ability to tell you, take a day off of work or, put your kids into daycare instead of, or so you can take a few days off from childcare or whatever. There's nothing like that. So their only option then is to give people medication that numbs their symptoms and makes capitalism, exploitation, and alienation more bearable.
I'm so sorry.
No, I'm done.
I'm reading off of one of my footnotes in the article. Studies have shown that approximately 80% of the responses to the medication was duplicated in placebo control groups. And similar conclusions were arrived at in recent studies, which pooled 73,000 patients and showed that only around 15% of the time do the drugs work better than the placebos. So again, a good portion of it is just people thinking that the pill will work, and you can literally not give them the pill and it would have the effect of the pill a large amount of the time. The researchers concluded that patients with depression are likely to improve substantially from acute treatment of their depression with drug or placebo. Although the mean effect of antidepressants is only a small improvement over placebo, the effect of active drug seems to increase the probability that any patient will benefit substantially from treatment by about 15%. So it's a big chunk of it is coming from the fact that people think that this pill that they're about to take will help them, and then they end up, changing in ways that end up reflecting that belief. They end up making that belief in the fact that it will help into a reality.
For sure.
Role in mood, appetite, and many other brain functions. Many antidepressive drugs have severe side effects. It was largely a lack of those problems that has persuaded doctors to prescribe Prozac to 2 million Americans.
One of those was student Elizabeth Wurtzel.
I had been on other medications before that didn't work nearly so well, but it really changed everything. There was one morning when I woke up and I felt like the idea of being alive didn't seem so awful. It was an amazing turnaround.
The drug led her to break the historical taboo about depression and write a book about hers.
I knew it was pretty safe to tell the story because I knew a lot of people would relate to it. I think that's what I was betting on. If I wrote it, it would make people feel better.
Wurtzel quickly became the Generation X face of the drug.
Seems like everyone's doctor is dealing this stuff now.
But Wurtzel's book was not the only one that captured the public imagination. Psychiatrist and author Peter Kramer wrote his from the perspective of the treating physician.
People who do well on it may say, this is my real self. The transformation is not away from the self, but towards some ideal self.
He then went on to speculate about how Prozac might change us in ways never before expected.
I thought, what will happen if we can do this with people who've never been depressed? If you could put someone on a medicine and he or she would become more socially adept. And I coined a term, cosmetic psychopharmacology, where the analogy was cosmetic surgery. So a medical procedure done for something other than treating illness.
Kramer's...
Dang, that is so good. That is so good, because that's kind of what what it is, I've heard this theory that, if everybody starts taking Adderall, if we're all on stimulants, then to compete, because we live in a competitive society that pits us against each other, then everybody's going to want to take Adderall, right? If I need to keep up with the other people in my workplace and they're on a drug that helps boost them, I'm going to want to get on that drug too if I want to keep up. So it kind of raises the level of everyone. And like I've been prescribed Adderall before, and what I kind of learned was like I was just being too hard on myself before I took it, right? Well, for one, I needed to figure out strategies like note taking and doing a calendar in my phone that helped me keep track of things, right? So there are certain strategies, real things you can do to help yourself be more in control and more organized and less stressed out. But also, I was just beating myself up about everything and, really just about not being perfect, not being ideal. And when you take the drug for a while, you can feel like, I can do anything. But then it wears off and you crash and the side effects are terrible. And, I haven't taken it for forever. And what I realized is I can still do the same things. I just have to give myself rest. I have to understand that I'm a human being who needs rest, and I can't just work, nose to the grindstone all the time and do everything myself. But our system kind of makes you feel like you need to be like that. And then the only way to feel like that, like you can do everything all day, is by taking drugs. So people are taking these. I like how he describes it there as almost like a cosmetic surgery for your brain. Just trying to make yourself this idealized version of what you should be like in your head. Yeah.
And what's always left out of the conversation is what is the reason that what are the reasons that lead people into, seeing Prozac or antidepressants as an option? What makes people depressed, right? What makes people have certain mental health issues? That's always left out, or when it's treated, it's like reduced to, okay, one chemical imbalance. I mentioned it last stream. It's what Richard Levins and Richard Lewontin called Cartesian reductionism. You're just trying to reduce everything to this one biochemical process. And that's a poverty of outlook, right? It's, science, however much we want to say, especially with the hard sciences, that it's disconnected from politics and ideology. It's not. It's not. The hard sciences are not disconnected from bourgeois ideology. And you see this in these theses, which took hold of medicine for decades on end. As someone mentioned, now no one believes it or treats it in that reductive manner. It's developed a little more, but what method is it that takes things and reifies it from everything else, takes the fact and removes it from the factors that allowed the fact to arise, and then just deals directly with the fact? That's the bourgeois method of analysis, right? That's fundamentally anti-dialectic, or at least a specific kind of bourgeois method of analysis, because Hegel was quote unquote bourgeois philosopher, a little more revolutionary, but bourgeois philosopher, and he was a dialectical thinker, and you have others as well. But it's a fundamental flaw of anti-dialectical thought reflecting itself in scientific investigation, right? And if instead of doing that, you ask, well, what are the social conditions which make this plethora of factors, how they impact biochemical processes, how then biochemical processes reciprocally impact the social and the attitudes of people, and what are the sort of relations of reciprocity that are conditioning the fact that I'm seeing, which is, okay, X person is depressed. If you look at that, you come to the radical conclusion that the forms of intercourse which dominate our societies, that means capitalist relations of production, are what is leading people to these positions. People are exploited, they're alienated, they're oppressed, they're disconnected from nature, they're disconnected from other people, they're disconnected from their work. They don't feel that they can engage in creative productions any time, any moment in their life. So all of these factors, which we covered last time, so I don't want to go on a long spiel about it. All of these factors contribute to these mental health states that people find themselves in. And you cannot explore that because for a few reasons. One, if you do that, you have to condemn the system. And ideologically, the system would very much prefer for those people to just be pilled than to be radicalized, because they realize that the answer to their problems is overthrowing the existing order. Secondly, that's not profitable for the medical pharmaceutical industrial complex either, right? They make profit from selling people these pills. It's $1 trillion industry. So these reasons have to be seen dialectically, and besides that, it's a poverty of outlook. You can bring up the question of their forms of thinking lead them to these erroneous conclusions. So it's there's fetters that are created by capitalist relations on productions, on production itself and on these other areas, but also on science. Science would flourish much more if it was under a socialist society where it would serve people's needs and not profit, and where the method of analysis would be the correct one, the method that allows you to engage with truth as best as possible, which is the dialectical materialist method.
Yeah, and we're seeing that with the advancements that are coming out of China.
Precisely.
Narrative about Prozac being able to change people's essential selves took hold.
Many claim that it transforms them, makes them more calm, more confident, more productive, somehow better than well.
Get in the hole. That's what I'm looking for. That's what makes you come back. I found that taking this medicine, this drug, I became a different person.
But it wasn't just the promise of a personal metamorphosis that made Prozac a household name.
There's nothing wrong with you that can't be cured with a little Prozac and a polo mallet.
Balzac was Engels' favorite writer.
Here we go. Here comes the Prozac.
Prozac's popularity wasn't just the result of a medical breakthrough, but also of a marketing one.
Prozac's marketing helped popularize the idea that our moods are neurochemical and that there are things we can do to change them.
Prozac took the mystery out of the science. It talked about
Eddie,
how the drug worked.
Another.
I want to address this question real quick by SM Palazzolo. I wonder what amount of antidepressants are distributed to depressed people in China, Cuba, Venezuela, Vietnam. I did in that serotonin study. The second part of it was looking at the alternative, which I looked at Cuba and the various other forms that they use to treat mental health issues, which not only does it emphasize prevention, but it also is focused on the environment, the immediate environment, so the family, the social environment, so their communities at large. And usually you have other activities that are the first go-to besides the pill, which are like certain like yoga and other exercise related things that are gone to, or if not like therapy, like discussion. And there's so many other things that are transformed before they try to transform and play with to see if things change and if the person overcomes their mental health issues before they go to the pill. So it's not that they're like anti-pill, and we shouldn't be either, but we should realize that there's all these other conditions, and if we can begin to adjust them and see if those work and changing the outcome of the person's depression or anxiety or whatever, we should do that before we start pilling people up.
Right, but the American system jumps right to pills because that makes money for big pharma. And actually, as the therapist we were watching on the last stream said, they actually get mad at you for weaning people off of pills. If you start giving people treatment that works outside of pills, the insurance companies stop paying for it, which is the exact experience I had with a long-term illness growing up as a kid. Anything that worked that wasn't a pill, the insurance didn't want to pay for. And then they mentioned the effect of marketing these drugs like Prozac. They were and I'm going to show you guys after this Prozac Revolution video, I'll show you a Prozac commercial that was famous. But they literally market it like it's a cheeseburger or something, like it looks like a McDonald's commercial, and they're selling you antidepressants. And this is an excellent article that I drew from a lot in my Journal of American Socialist Studies article, Journal of American Socialist Studies 2, available on MidwesternMarx.com, by the way, analyzing the American healthcare system and the opioid crisis, which is different than Prozac. Prozac's an SSRI or whatever you call it. But They spent millions and millions of dollars, not just on commercials to market these opioids, but on influencing academic institutions, influencing physicians and pushing them to prescribe it in higher doses, which is one of the main things with opioids is people were being prescribed it in just insane doses, 3, 4, 5 times the amount they were supposed to. And now it's making it really difficult to wean off. And, you know, once people have to quit taking it, they go through these horrific withdrawal symptoms. So it's just had a horrible effect on our country. And the Sackler family just yesterday won immunity. The courts gave them immunity from being punished and held accountable for this. So they dosed our entire country with opioids. Now a bunch of people are on heroin and fentanyl and dying. And the richest family in the world, or the Sackler family, is still one of the richest families in the world, and they're immune from any repercussions. And it's the same justice system that throws people in jail for nonviolent drug offenses that Joe Biden pushed, you know, for that's something that Joe Biden led the charge for. Was cracking down on nonviolent drug offenses when Joe Biden's own son has been doing drugs for the last 20 years and has been getting off scot-free. And when Joe Biden's donors are dosing the country with drugs and not being held accountable. So that shows how the bourgeois courts work in tandem with the bourgeois medical system.
It's the same thing we mentioned in the article on censorship. The misinformers are the ones waging the war on misinformation, which is actually a war on truth. And in terms of drugs, the largest drug cartels are the ones waging the war on drugs. And I just want to refer to Molly's point here. Okay, that's probably why they don't want you to self-wean off of those. The doctor can push you back. Yeah, check out the stream that we did last time. The doctor that goes over this, that the video that Eddie showed, he said it wonderfully. And he basically said at one point that a lot of the times, not all of the times, of course, but a lot of the times what people need is a friend, you know, someone they could just speak to. And that's one of the central components of the Cuban treatment of that. Like when you have these activities that you promote, like dancing and ballet and, you know, chess and all these different social activities, you allow these people to develop hobbies, and out of those hobbies engage with other people and become friends with other people. And it helps remove a lot of not all of them, of course, but a lot of the issues that they have going on, which are again, rooted in social isolation, alienation, and all these other phenomena.
Another way the drug's benefits were sold to the public was through its name. Eli Lilly hired branding agency Interbrand to come up with a memorable one.
Prozac has 2 syllables. The first syllable, PRO, was designed to suggest professional. The AC is designed to communicate activity. Coupled with the Z, it just sounds much more powerful and more effective as a name.
But it wasn't just the name that gave Prozac a leg up.
One of the first places that news about Prozac appears is in popular financial magazines, things that are reporting on its potential blockbuster status, how it's going to make a ton of money for its producers, and this kind of creates this buzz.
It was remarkable. New York Magazine had this pill on its.
You saw what they mentioned about the name, the importance of, you know, the marketing and the name pro so that it sounds professional. That's interesting because the way that things are labeled and the names they're so important in our age. And the imperialists know this. They wage their wars on humanity and people fighting for freedom and self-determination. They wage it under the names of freedom and we're gonna liberate this, and we're fighting for democracy, and we're spreading democracy. So like their usage of words, they realize that it's so important.
Cover it. I don't think anything like that had happened before.
As media coverage of the drug grew, stories about a possible link to suicide began to circulate. In 1991, the FDA convened hearings on the issue.
I finally admitted myself to a stress center. I begged them, lock me up because I'm going to die and I don't want to die.
No conclusive link was found, and the sale of Prozac continued.
This medicine had the career arc of a celebrity, that it was sort of overhyped and then demonized and, you know, trying to find its level through the press.
Ever since Prozac was introduced 5 years ago, it has developed what amounts to a cult following.
Before long, as other SSRIs began to eat away at Eli Lilly's market share, Prozac ads began appearing in general interest magazines rather than just medical journals, targeting patients, particularly women, instead of just their doctors. And commercials ran on TV for the first time.
People wanted control. They wanted to talk about their successes, their personal successes. And Prozac spoke to that.
Talk to your doctor today.
And it also introduced something new for sale. Since the 1950s, consumer goods like cars and washing machines had become symbols of success and happiness. Now, there was something else.
Prozac is saying that happiness itself is available for purchase and can be one of these things that defines what it means to be an American and have that.
And I
That's
see
the
people.
slow-mo. Oh,
I see people talking about how pharmaceuticals are one of the most powerful industries in America today. You know, and now rather than cars and the white picket fence being a sign of success in American culture, they're saying it's literally taking Prozac. It's having this pill, so it shows how the base of production, you know, control or affects culture and society and what we view as success and what we view as normal. You know, as long as the pharmaceutical companies are marketing these drugs to us, it's going to be ingrained in our culture. They're spending millions of dollars to ingrain it in our culture via marketing. Same thing with opioids. The same way that advertising took off, you know, at the beginning of the last century, and it made a lot of these consumer goods, like cars even, you know, sort of a part of the American way of life and something that every American family had. So it's just an example of the mode of production conditioning our culture. And then on the other hand, the superstructure, this Prozac nation, as they call it, helps condition the relations of production. Because rather than getting depressed and turning to revolution, people take this Prozac and it takes all their worries away for a few hours or whatever. And they're better able to function under an alienating mode of production.
yeah, and I draw the analogy in the article with that phrasing, like you're buying happiness in a capsule. That's Brave New World Soma. I don't know if you have, it's just like the happy juice.
It is.
That's literally what it is, and that was like a dystopian novel, right? So it's
Great
so
novel.
Yeah,
Much
it's a
better
great
than
novel.
1984.
100%. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Do you have anything else to say? I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. That's it. Yeah.
Aldous Huxley also had his wife inject him with LSD when he died, straight into his veins. So he had to be tripping balls. I wonder how that helped his depression.
That American dream.
And the more people who claim their share of it, the better Eli Lilly's bottom line. In 2001, with the patent set to expire, they launched a new drug for a new problem.
Seraphim is not really a new drug. It's just a new name for the popular antidepressant Prozac, now repackaged with a distinctly feminine look. Some accuse the drug manufacturer of trying to create a new market for Prozac by grossly exaggerating premenstrual problems.
Think it's PMS.
Did you take my keys?
Maybe it's PMDD.
Soon the airwaves were full of ads for other drugs promising to treat problems most of us didn't know we had.
I had restless leg syndrome.
Latisse, the first and only FDA-approved prescription treatment for inadequate or not enough lashes. Your lashes actually grow.
You do have a whole bunch of new pharmaceuticals coming out to enable people to do things that they like to do. So to be able to eat a bunch of cheeseburgers.
Time to see your doctor about America's most prescribed acid.
And think of all the money that goes into this. Not just the production of these more cosmetic focused pills, but the money that goes into marketing them. That all could be going into cancer research, or it could be going into combat heart disease, or it could be going into anything that would be more beneficial to the medical field, nutrition research. But instead, all the money is going into men's hair growth formula and, you know, these pills that take away your appetite so you can eat a bunch of cheeseburgers or whatever. yeah, it just shows the sort of consumerist, frivolous nature of production under capitalist society, consumerist capitalist society.
Control medicine.
Or to be able to have sex. You have drugs like Viagra coming out. These are responding to genuine human needs and desires, but those needs and desires hadn't always been configured as illnesses the way they were during and after the Prozac era.
I think Prozac made people very aware of the possibility that medicines were going to step out of their bounds and be used by people who maybe had some quality that wasn't rewarded socially, and to move to some state that was better socially rewarded.
That's a long way around to saying that it was going to be used for profit. Just to fill up people to make a bunch of money.
Yep. Tell them that their desire, their want, their alienation is all a mental health illness. Slap that label on them.
There was so many
like
debates.
They can't function without the meds.
There was so many debates going on in economics when advertisement really took off, like especially with the libertarian free market laissez-faire trends, because the question was like, how is this a free market now that there's so much consumer manipulation? And the way that they rationalized it was that what advertisement does is not create new desires, but help people show people the things that they already desire, or the things that they would desire if they knew about them. So it's not a market manipulation, it's a market enhancement.
Here is, so people know how this was being marketed to consumers. This is a Prozac commercial that when I saw it a few years ago, I could not even believe it was real. I believe we had to watch this for my healthcare administration class, but I couldn't believe this was a real thing. But this is where the budgets of pharmaceutical companies are going. Largely, I don't know what percentage of their spending, but a huge amount of their spending is put towards marketing rather than research and development. And this is the kind of stuff they're producing. Ask yourself if you think this should be a part of the healthcare system, if this has anything to do with healthcare.
Brother and sister, together we'll make it through. Oh, yeah. Someday a spirit will take you and guide you there. I know you've been hurting, but I've been waiting to be there for you. And I'll be there just helping you out whenever I can. Everybody's free. Everybody's free. Oh, yeah. To feel good. Oh, to feel good.
Oh, to feel good. The whole world is Prozac. God is Prozac.
Oh my god, that is
Isn't that
so
unbelievable.
Who comes up with that? And then what board decides, like, yeah, good idea, let's do that? Like, how disconnected do you have to be to not like realize that that is insane? Let's pill the whole planet up.
Right. They're literally saying the answer to, all your problems is this pill. You're just going to have pure euphoria. Then they have the woman taking care of her baby. We know life is hard, but take this pill. You have the young girl laying on her bed, maybe going through something traumatic, as we all do when we're growing up. Growing up is hard. You got all these hormones because you're going through puberty and you're emotional as shit, and it's just hard, right? But they're like, take this pill, take this Adderall, take this whatever, so you can be perfect. You can be the perfect kid and sit in school 8 hours a day without moving and enjoy every second of your life as if that's what life is, and it creates kind of this idealistic idea of what life should be. Like, I should feel good all the time. Like, you don't have to feel good all the time. Sometimes in life you feel bad. And that's, if you deal with it and you're okay with it, eventually you'll feel good again. But yeah. Thank you so much, Ross. Who's your daddy? You are Ross. I really appreciate that.
We're going to have that in the diplomas, because we're planning on giving diplomas to all the people that participated in the basics of Marxism course at the end. And we got to add something to Ross's diplomas, like Ross, Midwestern Mark Sugar Daddy, Ion Coil. That would be the diploma. I do that with Noah. Whenever I have to send them the new books, I put Noah, Bag of Bananas, Krashivik.
Love it. Thank you so much, Sam. These $2 are for Ross's profile pic. That's great. Thank you. And Sam, I know you said you're gonna maybe dip out for a sec, but if you have a song, or you'll have a song. So if we're still streaming when you come back, we'd love to play the song. So
yes, please read his blog.
Yeah, Ross's blog is awesome. Yeah. Do you have anything else you wanted to touch on in terms of the Prozac or the mental health care stuff?
I mean, there's one video here that's just like a minute, and if I think it's the right one, it's the one that's like a commercial. It's set up like these pill commercials, but then it's like try nature. I don't know if you've seen it before, but it's like, are you depressed? You have anxiety? Try nature. I don't know. It's just a minute and 25 seconds. I don't know if it's the right one because it's from the National Geographic, so it might not be the right one.
You find yourself longing for the apocalypse? I did. I was looking for a reason to live. Hi. Are you feeling tired, irritable, stressed out? Well, you might consider nature.
From the people that brought you Getting Outside comes prescription strength Nature, a non-harmful medication shown to relieve the crippling symptoms of modern life.
Nature's recommended for humans of all ages, and it's great for pets too.
Nature can reduce cynicism, meaninglessness, anal retentiveness, and murderous rage. In clinical studies, Nature is proven to decrease work-induced catatonia.
Caution. Nature may cause you to slow down, quit your job, or seriously consider what the you're doing with your life.
If you are overly cynical, jaded, or emotionally numb, you may need to increase your dose of Nature. Do you have trouble being even mildly uncomfortable? Nature may not be right for you. Side effects may include spontaneous euphoria, taking yourself less seriously, and being in a good mood for no apparent reason.
So ask your doctor if nature is right for you.
Clickable withdrawal. You saw that one? Everything in nature is clickable.
I love it. That's my antidepressant, getting sunlight every morning, going for walks when I'm feeling cramped in my room.
Same here, man. I have to take at least a 1 hour walk each day. From what I've read, Marx did too. He was always walking around London with Paul Lafargue, especially towards the end of his life, Lafargue and Engels. And yeah, it's just so important to be out there in nature. And what's funny is that when I first had the baby still does it, but when he starts crying, if you take him outside and you let him like see the grass, not touch grass, but see the grass, he'll like stop crying. And he absolutely loves nature. Like, you take him to a store or something, he'll start crying within like 20 minutes. But if you take him out to a natural park and you like walk him through it, he won't cry at all. He just absolutely loves nature.
That's awesome. The Grenada Revolution has the best music on YouTube. Interesting. I've never seen that. Thank you, Lemonheads. Zorro. Appreciate it. Get some sun. Yep. Touch the dirt. Yeah, sometimes I crawl around. I do like bear crawls outside because I've heard it's good to touch the grass. I'll just probably look a little bit crazy, but whatever. People know I wrestle in this town. Do you want to make fun of these fresh and fit guys today? Or do you want to save that for another day?
Yeah, I still have a little bit of energy. It's well, how about you?
Yeah, we don't have to watch the whole thing. This one will probably be more casual. So it'll be perfect. I'm just gonna speed it up a little bit. I'm sure people know the Fresh and Fit podcast, guys. If you don't, you'll probably recognize them when you see them because they've had so many clips go viral. But they do like a dating podcast, and they're pretty popular. And I kind of want to get more into, or I want to react to more of these because they're going viral. This and this other podcast called the Whatever Podcast go viral with young people. Because they're talking about dating and stuff, and there's plenty of Marxist analysis that's there to be made and that's there to be pointed out, as you'll see in this video. And I just want to criticize and make fun of some of their blatant misogyny and stupidity. So,
thank you, the five heads, for the $2.20. Not dollars. New Zealand. Is that New Zealand dollars?
Yeah, I think so.
Te Ware Tapawa is a good health model to look at. Thank you. Check them out.
I absolutely will be checking that out. It's right up my alley. Thank you. All right, let's check this out. This is not getting sex. Kick her to the curb immediately from the Fresh and Fit podcast. I hate these guys, dude.
Because I know I'm about to say something here controversial, but I'm just going to say it anyway. Because a lot of guys, some of you guys might be married, some of you guys might be in a relationship with a woman, and I'm going to say this, and I'm going to stand firm on it. I don't care what anyone says. If a woman does not give you the bedroom fun, okay, I'm trying to keep it YouTube friendly, she's useless to you. And I'm going to say why, okay? I know that sounds awful to say it like that, to objectify in that way, but the thing is this: men don't ask for much from women.
She's useless. Useless. I mean, that's just factually inaccurate, right? Even if you're not getting... And if there's no, like, they always hit on a little bit of truth, right? Like, if there's no intimacy in your relationship, yes, that is a problem. That is an issue, unless you're someone who's asexual, which those people do exist. But to say that a human being is useless because they won't have sex with you, like, just from a practical materialist standpoint, you know, I'm sure they're doing something. I'm sure they're cleaning or cooking or, you know, working a job and bringing home some money. I'm sure they're doing something. They're not completely useless as a human being because they won't give you sex. That's just objectification of women. That's just seeing them as nothing, as having no worth but sex. I mean, what else do you call that?
Which is so incredibly ridiculous because, again, it's not only women, but it's largely women who take up the role of now, because of inflation, wages, capitalism, having to have a job outside and then also having a domestic job that's unpaid for. And there's so much labor, even if they only do the domestic job, there's so much labor that's there, that's being done, that's productive, that's useful, and that's not paid for. That's completely unpaid. So to have, you know, a lad like this say something as stupid as that is just, yeah.
Unreal.
Right? We want some booty, maybe a sandwich here or there, peace and quiet. Men don't want much. Women, however, taller than me, make more money than me, successful, confidence, all this stuff, right? Big dick, all this other stuff. So women require a lot from men. So
you could just name different things that men like about women, right? Big boobs, a big butt, not annoying, doesn't talk too much, supports my dreams, cooks, cleans, gives me sex whenever I want. You could do the same thing. Men have preferences, women have preferences.
Men don't ask for much, but since we don't ask for much, the things that we ask for are much more important. So if a girl doesn't give you sex, bro, that's like 1/3 of what she's supposed to give you gone, 50% almost. So my thing is this: if you're in a relationship right now, for all the guys that are watching out there, you're in a relationship with a girl, your wife, whatever it is, and she's no longer giving you enthusiastic sex, start to prepare to kick her to the curb, okay? Because what'll happen is if a woman doesn't respect you, this is what she's gonna do. She's gonna dangle that pussy against you. Oh, you want some of this? Oh, okay, take out the trash. Cook for me. Oh, take me to Nobu. Take me to Komodo. And that right there, when a woman starts leveraging bedroom fun against you, that's when she no longer respects you guys. And right now, you're seeing the byproduct of a woman that no longer respects her husband. You know what I'm saying? Talking to him like this in the.
Can you pause that real quick? Because this is a really good point from Ralph Waldo Emerson. We had Mao earlier, now we have Ralph Waldo Emerson in the chat. This is, no one gets to this level. Like, we literally reincarnated two great dudes, and we have them in the chat. He says, people are meant to be useless. One exists for one's own sake. If we exist to be used, we are slaves. That's from the Kantian point of view. You're supposed to see other people as ends in themselves. When you don't treat them as ends in themselves, when you treat them in a utilitarian fashion of what's the use that they provide for me, you're dehumanizing them, right? And that's one of the fundamental tenets of the Kantian ethic. Treat people as you would like to be treated, or and his jargon is act as if the maxim of your action were to become a universal law. So if everyone acted in this way, and one of the things you find is that you would want for people to be treated as ends in themselves and not as means. And when you engage with people according to the use that they provide for you, you are subsequently treating them as a means and not as a full human. And what he's saying is that, well, that's the norm. That's the norm. The norm is to use people, and when you can't use them, then they're no good.
Yeah, all their relationships, you can tell they view it as transactional. What am I getting out of this? What do I get? And in Kristen Godsey's book, Why Women Have Better Sex Under Socialism, she talks about this, how people start to see relationships and dating as a market transaction. What can you offer me? What kind of domestic labor can you offer me? And in return, I provide money and status. And it also creates this, what we call the gold digger mentality, where women, one of the main things that's important to them in a guy is money, rather than, personality and other important things and compatibility. And what Kristen Godsey said was a lot of the women had better dating lives under socialism because they felt like the men actually had to be interesting. They actually had to be attentive. They actually had to, engage in the relationship rather than just saying, I have a lot of money, give me sex and make me sandwiches and, I'll take care of you, which is basically what these fresh and fit guys are saying.
By the way, this isn't GWF Hegel. This is Eddie's version, which is Hagel, the Wisconsinite version of GWF.
The phenomenology of bagels from Hegel.
Yeah, but and this goes to show the way in which the social relations of that exist, specifically the relations of production and the forms of intercourse that are related to producing the things which are necessary for society, they shape basically everything else. They influence everything else. And as Marx lays out as early as the German ideology, along with Engels, and it gets re-mentioned in the manifesto, and it really gets concretized to its highest form. And Engels is the origins of the family, private property, and the state. In class society, what these relationships really end up being is a vessel for private property to get handed down. And it ends up being reducing the family and family relations to just a economic unit. And that has transformed in different epochs of class society. And it takes a specific, very transactional, very commodified, very marketized form within capitalism. And I think a good example of that is like dating sites, right? Dating sites is it's like a marketplace. It's quite literally treating what is supposed to be a sort of spontaneous encounter between two people that then develops into a sort of fidelity to the encounter, and love grows. It tries to produce that in a very mechanistic form and in a very staged form through this encounter that's done through this marketplace of the app. and it removes part of the essence of love, which is the fact that there has to be chance involved, that then in the process of the loving relationship developing, then when you look back at it, it looks like it's necessity, not only chance. What once appeared as if it was chance, with time it appears as, oh my God, we were meant to be together, right? The encounter, once you encounter that person, it feels like, oh my God, it happened out of chance. After 10 years, you look back at it and you're like, we were meant to be together. It was necessity.
In the way, because here's the thing right now. He probably still pays the bills. He probably still protects her.
Oh, he does.
He probably still takes care of her. So his roles are still he's still doing his job, but she ain't doing her job, saying, well, I didn't force you, blah, blah, blah. Shifting blame, not taking accountability. So guys, if you're going to give you bedroom fun, she doesn't have to give you sex. I'm not saying she has to, but what I am saying is that you need to kick her to the curb and find a girl that will.
I got to say, though, this man is brave. He is on a live interview telling his wife this in person. Your props to you, brother. I don't know who you are, but goddamn, that's your wife, bro.
He already was having a conversation with her.
Yeah.
But so what's your take? We'll start with Nessa and work over on.
Honestly, I agree with you guys. Like, as men, like you said, you don't really ask a lot, like, for women besides sex. So it's like, I'm a person that enjoys sex, and if there isn't that in the relationship, honestly, I don't know if I can stay in something like that. You
Wow.
know? It's like,
well, how about this? So let's say you don't feel like having sex, but would you give it to him if he's feeling it?
okay,
He wants to have it?
yeah.
That's the real question. It's not when you want it, it's when he wants it.
Okay, yes, but you'd have to like either go down on me first or something, because like, if I'm not in the mood, like I'm not wet.
Okay, then you break up with your guys. Okay.
What?
That's part of that.
Come on.
Okay.
You guys have sex with no foreplay?
Yeah.
Hold on. So let me ask you this. So it's funny you said, because I actually kind of agree with you. But let me ask you this, though. What if you want sex, right? 3 times a day?
Like I said, I'm a person that really enjoys it, so I don't mind.
Okay.
But like if I'm like really tired, let's say one day, and I've been out all day, and like I just like my body hurts, like I've been walking in heels for hours, like I'm just tired, and you get mad at me for saying no because I'm tired, then I'm gonna feel like I'm like forced to have like sex with you.
Because I will admit, right? You should have some rest days, of course, especially because it's like a big dick. But at the same time,
No
does the guy rest his support for you financially? He doesn't.
Which is why you're gonna have multiple women.
Right? The lights have to be
Money
on.
line.
Don't agree with that.
The car has to be running. Bills have to be paid. There's no rest days for the guy. So for you, why is the rest days?
Takes 2
Who
minutes.
the fuck is donating $25 to this? Like, there's been so many super chats that are $25 for just this fucking nonsense. We had I spent my first like year of teaching ethics, TA and ethics class, and one of the classic examples of like the need for regulations in the market that are given by just basic liberals, we're not talking Marxists or socialists or even social democrats, is the fact that if people had the opportunity to just pay for stuff, they would pay for such unethical, stupid things like Dana White's slap sport or this podcast. And what we've seen over the last specifically 5 years is all these ethics examples that are used in classrooms for why we need certain regulations. Because if people could just pay for 2 people to slap each other without any defense, they would do it. They've literally happened. And it shows like the universalizing character of commodity production and how it infiltrates even the most ridiculous extremes and the most like unimaginable, in the sense of what's unimaginable is that actually happening. Like, we use these as case studies of how ridiculous extending this commodification to its limits are, and they've happened now.
Yeah, like I can't even believe these guys are real. This girl's like, what if I'm not in the mood and I'm tired, and a guy on the left, and he'll go on to say this more, is like disagreeing, like, no, even then, and I don't even have to like do anything to actually get you in the mood. You just have to serve me. It's like, how the fuck is this a real guy with a real podcast giving real advice with people sending him money on the internet? I have to imagine it's a lot of really young kids, honestly. But I mean, kids don't have necessarily $25 to send. So yeah, it is proof that people will pay for anything.
And who wants to have sexual relations with someone who doesn't want to do it back? That logic,
what the hell?
I've never even been able to understand it, because part of the appeal of that, part of like the turn on process, is the reciprocity, the being wanted. That's such an important component of it that I don't understand this. Like, oh, you have to give it to me even if you don't want it. What the hell are you talking about?
Because he sees them as objects. It might as well be like a fleshlight to him.
Yeah.
Literally, that's how he's talking about women. Like, yeah, I don't want to get like too into the details and get like vulgar here, but why would you want to make love to somebody who's not in the mood? That sounds terrible, dude. Like, you're a psycho. It is narcissism and psychopathy in a way, if we're going to use mental health terms. Would you guys travel to Miami to go on their show? Hell yes, I would do that. I would rip these guys a new one, too. Thank you, Lemonhead.
Like, I work a lot, like, often. Like I said, I'm a model, or like I'm an artist. Like, I'm always doing something. Like, I'm just always doing something. So, like, I get tired, you know. I'm hard worker. I get tired.
And I think that's okay to say
yeah,
no
like,
one time.
it's okay.
Guys,
It's not that you're saying no all the time. It's just.
But
So you guys don't think your girl could say no?
Yeah,
like, you come home
happen.
and you want to, and she don't want to, and she says no, it's a problem. You're gonna kick it to the curb.
Yeah, the woman is not like
Yes.
What the hell?
Here's
What
my
do you
thing.
mean? Yes.
If I come home from work and I am tired, I want to.
That girl's based. Shout out to that girl. They're basically saying women have to sell themselves in the labor market. They have to do all the domestic labor at home for free. Then they have to please me whenever I want because I'm selling my labor in the market and being the breadwinner. You know, like they are too. 99% of women nowadays have careers and are selling their labor in the market. Plus, you expect them to make you a sandwich and clean and do all this free domestic labor. And then they have to be your sex slave too. Like, narcissism.
Reclaimed being there has a that sign being there has a good comment. Obviously, it's because they don't want sex; they want sexualized power, and I think that might be right.
Yeah, that's got to be a dynamic to it, right? Like, you give me what I want, or I'm gonna kick you to the curb. Even the way he's phrasing that, right? I'm not going to end the relationship or find someone who is more, geared towards my sexual preferences. No, I'm going to kick you to the fucking curb if you don't give me what I want.
And just, sorry, real quick.
No,
I know
you're
these
good.
assholes are not like working class, but in some parts of the working class, we can't ignore stuff like this existing in the way that that some men in working class families think. And in the same way that things like racism, deotherization, and demeaning, and the considering of people of other races, which is it's a social construct, but of people of other races ontologically inferior. That's how MOK defines it. Racism at its core is thinking that an other being is ontologically inferior and you're ontologically superior. These dynamics do the same thing, but with sex, right? And with their partners, and it's a form of false consciousness, because at the end of the day, the communities, at least in the working class, the communities that they exist in have the same shared interest, right? Emancipation would mean the same thing for each one. For the woman, emancipation would be to remove from itself not only capitalism but capitalist patriarchy, and for the man it would be to remove capitalism and exploitation in a system that puts him in a position where, as the reclaimed Design mentioned, makes him crave in certain moments sexualized power.
Thank you for the $5 super chat, Yazan Shobaki. Our labor conditions in China is awful as some news outlets portrayed. No, they're not perfect, but there's a lot of BS about them in U.S. media. We talked about China earlier this stream, if you want to go back to the beginning.
Not anymore, I think, would be a good point, because there's old videos from the 90s that they keep bringing up. Today, the conditions in China are a hell of a lot better than the conditions in most of the places.
The nets outside the Foxconn factories was a real thing for a while, but not anymore.
And she's like, oh, I'm tired. Then at that point, remember, we agreed to a long relationship. So my deal is, at the bargain, I'm paying the bills, I'm taking care of the whole household. If all I want is some pleasure when I get home from work, why is that bad?
I don't understand the link between paying the bills and having sex with what's the
Because
connection?
remember, right? It takes two roles in a relationship. One person does A, one person does B. If I'm the guy and I'm a real man, I'm taking care of the household, I'm paying the bills, and I'm adding to the family. When I get home from that whole stressful day, or let's say a whole...
But women aren't. But by selling them their labor in the labor market and by doing the domestic labor, they're not taking care of the family. It's only you. No, you're just saying you want to be in charge. You want to be able to control them. So you're creating this narrative where you're the breadwinner. You're, number one.
whole week of stress, right? My girl's home as well. Why can't we have sex? Because I get it. You might be tired from mulling. I 100% get that. But I'll say this. Every now and then, I understand that. But for the most part, if I'm paying the bills, I expect on some level, you know what? If you're my girl and you don't want me to step out, then take care of me while I'm here.
Yeah, but if you have like the financial power, doesn't mean that you can decide everything in a relationship.
I think you should put your woman in the mood. If you want to have sex 3 times a day,
That's the best point. I feel like I feel like these guys also are weirdos, and people keep saying in the comments they don't pull. That might be it too. They're just like, yeah, you should just give it to me. You know, it's like, well, read them some poetry, put some rose petals on the bed, do some foreplay. Again, not to get too vulgar, but like there are ways if someone's not in the mood and you really want to get them in the mood, other than just saying, I make the money. I'm the real breadwinner around here. Fuck me.
We gotta have a
ridiculous.
Patreon category where what we do is like live streams that are related to like lessons in foreplay or something, Marxist foreplay lessons. Yeah, I can't imagine these Romeos pulling too much, so that's definitely a factor in the mix.
you might not have to go down on me, but like come kiss my neck. Be affectionate. And
I will say 100%. You can't just rush in if it's dry. That's
yeah, like
it's a hard
that's
desert.
for you guys.
But you know what I'm saying.
I think a lot of guys.
I'll do that shit, but I'm not gonna. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, you know what? I'm just gonna have to say the truth about this because I like.
Here comes the genius. So here you're gonna see this guy's worse than even this guy.
This because earlier in the show we asked you ladies, would you be content with a man stepping out and having sex with other women? All of you were pretty much like, no, you will not accept that. However, you will not pleasure him when it doesn't convenience you. Hold on, let me finish.
What?
Because you guys are saying if I'm tired and I'm not ready or whatever, I should be able to say no. And my answer to that, let me finish. My answer to that is this. I get it. You know, you might have had a long day walking in your heels. You might have had a long day working. You might have had a long day doing something, whatever it may be. But the point is this, okay? That's like me saying, oh, you had a long day working with your heels. Well, you know what? I didn't pay the bills this week. You know, I was so focused on making sandwiches. Damn it, man. I was so focused on the light just came off. Oh my God, I was so focused. Here's the problem, ladies. You guys want to be able to get the benefits of male provisioning and security and protection without giving up what you're supposed to be giving to the man. Because the reality is this.
This is a disgusting human being. And they all said they're willing to, too. Just sometimes they're really tired from doing all this domestic labor and stuff. But he says, well, because my labor in the market oftentimes creates more money than your free labor that you give domestically, or, you know, the labor that a lot of women create by selling their labor. I mean, a lot of the wealth women create by selling their labor in the market. Mine's more valuable, so therefore you owe me sex. Sex is no longer a thing between two people who are in love, two people who are intimate with each other, two people who want to be together. It is now 100% a transaction. It's a transaction based on the amount of money that I have. The universal equivalent money should now be able to be exchanged for sex. And these girls said, you know, they would mostly be willing to be intimate. Just sometimes they're tired. But even that is not enough, you know. And what does he say? What does he say? You don't want your man to go cheat on you, right? So it's I'm literally going to go cheat on you. I'm going to leave this relationship because all this relationship is worth to me is sex, right? I see you as an object, as a sex object, and if you're not going to give me sex, I'm going to go cheat. I'm going to go find someone else who will give me sex. It's like, what is the relationship to you? Do you not love this person? Do you not care about this person? Are you that willing to break a person's trust because they won't give you sex whenever you want? Like, it's just a total degradation of what human relationships are. And it's seeing it as fully transactional. And one of my favorite lines is relations between people become relations between things under capitalism. That's exactly what this is. The sexual relationship or intimate relationships are no longer a relationship between two people. It's now, you know, a transaction based on the amount of money that the man makes.
And it's so deeply rooted in culture because what he just said there is, you know, a rehashed version of an old line from a Lil Wayne song, which is, I tell my B when she better F me good because if another girl could, she gonna F me good. I wish I could delete so many rap lines that for some reason are just stuck in my head and just like replace them with Hegel, Marx, Lenin quotes, but I can't, dude. I don't know why.
She got a big booty, so I call her Big Booty. Thank you so much, Sam Dixon. That's a great quote.
Someone
That'll be
donated
my,
$50 to these fucking assholes.
They have a Patreon too.
Oh my
Like,
God.
remember when we felt bad about making the Patreon because we didn't want to ask people for money to do Marxist revolutionary education? These guys have a Patreon for just spreading sexist bullshit.
It's like
right?
There's this clip of Theo Vaughn. Someone calls into his show, and he says, they say, you know, Burger King had a 10 nuggets for $1 special, and I ate it, and my stomach is all turned. I got diarrhea now and stuff. And he's like, that doesn't sound like a deal. That sounds like a risk. You know, they basically, you shit your pants, and you gave them $1. And that's what these people are doing. They're giving them money, and they're getting stupider by what they're saying.
They're paying to have their relationships ruined.
And I'm your husband. I'm supposed to protect and care for you. I can't just say, damn, man, I'm not really feeling it right now. Like, you know, I'm kind of scared. I don't know how I feel about this. Like, this guy might kill me. You know what? I'm not in the mood. You know what? I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling great today. You got this one, right? You can watch the porn. You got this one. The gun's in the thing. I'm going to go back to sleep. No, that's the problem, is that a man's roles are static while your roles are negotiable. And my argument is this. If you want to be able to say, I want to have bedroom fun at this time, whatever, you want to have these rules in place with when you're going to pleasure a man, when what he asks for is actually not that important. It's very little compared to what he gives you, putting his life on the line, providing for you financially, putting a house over your head, paying the bills, etc. You can't even give him sex. Then you need to at least accept the reality that he's going to want to have sex with other women, and you should not only allow it, but you should not, well, I'm not going to say allow because you don't really have the choice there, but you should accept it and let him do it and not give him a hard time, because all of you guys want to be able to exercise your sexual privilege, but you still want to get his roles all the time non-negotiable, which is fucked up, which is why it is BS that guys have to bring all this to the table and women don't want to give him sex. And that's why I tell guys all the time.
If somebody breaks into my house with a gun and holds it to my head and threatens my life, I'm going to fight back. So therefore, sex should be the same thing. You should feel like there's a gun to your head and your life is threatened. And if you don't give me sex, you know, you're going to die. Like, that's literally what he's saying. Of course you're going to fight back if someone invades your home. They're threatening your life. They could kill you. And then that's the analogy that he uses. He says that, you know, it's the same for women. I would fight off a home intruder, so you should give me sex. So you want women to feel like there's a gun pressed to their head, like there's an intruder who's going to kill them if they don't have sex with you? I mean, this is just pure insanity. I don't know how much more I can watch of this. This girl has some good lines coming up, I believe.
By you being a man, being in a relationship with a woman, you have to bring more to the table than she does. I hate to say it like that. Women date up, they don't date down. So if you're dating up, you're not looking for an equal, you're looking for a superior. So if you're looking for a superior, you got to provide for that superior. And if you don't want to do it, that's cool, but you're going to have to share them.
Okay, I want to hear your
You
thoughts.
can't have your cookie and eat it too, man. Your cake and eat it too.
I want to hear your thoughts.
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
So I feel like when you're in a relationship, most men, and when I first got in, like you first get into a relationship, there's a lot more sex, and I feel like that is because it's exciting and everything like that. When you get used to being in a relationship with somebody, I don't think if a woman is telling her man, no, I don't want to have sex, no, I don't want to have sex, and he's doing those things, like purposely trying to put her in the mood, kissing on her, I think then that's a problem. Yeah. But if you're coming home and you're just like, hey, I need you to do it, and then, oh, she doesn't want to give it to you, and oh, why aren't you giving it to me? Now I'm gonna go see the girl next door, but it's like you didn't even try to put me in the situation.
He doesn't have to though. Like I'm gonna go a step further. Your pleasure is irrelevant. I'm gonna say it. I am gonna say it. Your pleasure is irrelevant because here's the thing. I'm gonna say
that's enough. That is absolutely enough. That's
you gotta bring up
these guys don't pull.
you gotta bring up that Lenin quote that you like. These people deserve nothing but to be.
These opportunists and charlatans who deserve nothing other than to be. The pleasure's irrelevant. I mean, how could you view sex in any more transactional way? Right? It's something that I pay for. I am the breadwinner, so you owe it to me. And even the act of sex now isn't, you know, this intimate thing where, you know, both people are giving and receiving pleasure, which is what sex is. That's why it's, you know, awesome. It's a great part of being human. But these guys, they just fully see it as a transaction to the point where they don't, you know, your pleasure is irrelevant. You are an object to pleasure me in return for money, housing, and food. In return for material possessions, commodities, the universal equivalent, money.
And in a way, these people never end up having sex. It's just in their heads, since they treat humans as objects, it's just masturbation.
Yup.
Cordy says capitalism, paying for your own destruction. Yep.
That dude must be terrible. Right, like how if that's your view of sex, how are you the women he's with must hate it. If he just views them as objects and their pleasure is irrelevant. I mean, I don't feel bad for the guy, but I do feel bad for any young kids who are watching this shit. Like, this is absurd. This is so wrong. This is so anti-human. I mean, that's really what it is. It is anti-humanity. Fresh
And like
Fit podcast.
The entitlement in general is
right.
It's not only like sad for the influence it's having on younger people that don't have role models, because these are the role models that capitalism creates. In socialism, you have Che, you have these great people to look up to. In capitalism, you have this, you have Andrew Tate, you have a bunch of other idiots. But it's damaging to the role models. I mean, to the kids. It's damaging, obviously, to the women that are with these idiots. But it's also, in a way, damaging to them. Like, you can't have your soul, and I don't want to get metaphysical here, but you can't have your soul healthy when you are that sort of person. You can't engage not only in sex, but you can't engage in a healthy relationship. Because part of a healthy relationship is realizing that the loss of the other person is something that's always there. That you always have to be empathetic and you always have to give in a relationship. And that, without that loss, you have no impetus to give and to sacrifice and to have this reciprocal relationship of love that is fundamental for having a healthy relationship. So these people can't have actual sex. They can't have a relationship. They're living very poor lives. And it's in ways self-inflicted, because they're the ones that are objectifying other human beings and reducing their partners to that.
Right, and these guys are super obsessed with things like body count and stuff like that. It's just so obvious that their view of other people is so tainted and it's so commodified almost. It's sad. It's like, it bars the ability to engage in reciprocal, caring, intimate relationships, which we talk about all the time, how capitalism creates narcissism and psychopathy, sort of on a mass scale, because that's what it incentivizes. And that's the kind of heroes that are propped up, like the Fresh and Fit podcast guys. Under socialism, I think the government should just ban that podcast from existing. Sorry, guys. We all voted.
It reminds me of the king of the Ring of Gyges story in Plato's Republic. Socrates is asked, and I haven't reread it in a while, but Socrates is asked about the question of justice, and he's told really that we only do justice because we know that if we act unjust or if we break ethical barriers, we will be punished. If we had the ability to not be punished, we would act in horrific ways. And so they give this example, the person that's arguing against Socrates, they give this example of the Ring of Gyges. And if this person...
my brother did a philosophy video about the Ring of Gyges.
Hell yeah. So you know what's coming. When you put the ring on, you become invisible. And, hypothetically, this person who becomes invisible can then assassinate the king, get close to the queen, become king himself, and basically do whatever he wants, give in to all of the most base desires. And he would be perfectly fine because he can't get caught because he's got the ring that makes him invisible and avoid punishment. And the point of the story, according to the person who gave it, was that really we only act ethically because we're scared of punishment. If we had the ability to not get caught, to not be punished, we wouldn't act ethically. And the response that Socrates gives, it's Plato, but Socrates, the character, is that person will have his soul destroyed because he would be doing bad. So what he's doing is not only affecting others, but it's affecting himself too. He's not acting in accordance with reason and honesty, and by not acting individually in accordance with justice, he is damaging himself as much, if not worse, as what he's damaging others. And these people, they're not just destroying others, they're destroying themselves.
Have you heard the story of the warrior in the mirror? It's kind of similar.
I don't think
There's this warrior who's training every day. He's doing sword fighting practice every day. And then he gets this mirror that says, I'll show you anything that you want. And the guy basically uses the mirror to watch beautiful women, and then beautiful women having sex, and then tons of beautiful women having sex with each other. And every day he trains less and less, and he spends more time in his room watching the mirror, watching pornography, and just watching this stuff. And then one day a dragon comes to the village, and the mirror tells him, it was the prophecy, or you were destined to take out this dragon and save the village. But the mirror reveals that it's the devil himself, and it's tricked this guy by giving him access to whatever he wants, whatever pleasure he wants, has made him this weak shell husk of a man who just sits around watching crazier and crazier porn videos every day. And the dragon wipes everything out. And the story ends by the hero asks the mirror, can you show me those videos or those women one more time? So even as he's lost everything, all he can think about is watching, feeding his addictions, feeding his base desires. It's a really interesting story. I saw a YouTube video about it the other day, but
those metaphors are they're so important, and they go back a very long time in both the West and the East as essential forms of transmitting knowledges through stories and through these myths and the messages that come out of them. I thought when you started that with the mirror, I thought you were going in a rehashed version of the portrait of Dorian Gray, where he's got the ability to just act horribly, and what ends up getting destroyed is not him, but this beautiful portrait that was made of him. And so he has to hide it in his attic, when he checks, it's a very scary portrait. But yeah, it's self-destruction. When you act bad, you're not just affecting other people, it's affecting you. You're self-destroying yourself, and that's what a lot of these people are doing.
Absolutely. Well, do you have anything else you want to cover today? I think it was a great stream. It's midnight over here. I'm about out of steam, but I had some great topics today. Thank you to everyone in the chat, every super chatter, every moderator. Really appreciate you guys for supporting our project. Couldn't do it without you. Wouldn't do it without you. Wouldn't be able to. So hope you enjoy this. Make sure to check out our article about censorship. Please, 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 please share that article. Comment on that article. Send it to people who might be interested. Make TikToks about it. I don't know. That's what I'm going to do. And then check out the movie review I just did of the sci-fi film District 9. And yeah.
We have to pull up the Paul Rudd meme in Hot Ones. That's like, look at us. We said we're not going to go over an hour. We're both very tired today. And look at us, 2 hours and 22 minutes. And also, make sure to check out our publishing press, all of our books. And I wanted to let you know that we should have, perhaps next month, we will be releasing Thomas Riggins's book on classical German philosophy and Engels' views on both Hegel and Feuerbach. And that's fundamental to understand Marxism, which is where is it coming from philosophically, what traditions is it pulling from, and how is it transforming both Hegel and Feuerbach and really the young Hegelian movement, philosophical movement in general. So look out for that. It's a great intro text to that topic. And we will include within that Engels' text as well, Ludwig Feuerbach and the outcomes of classical German philosophy. So it should be a good book to learn Marxism and its philosophical foundations.
For sure. All right. Well, without further ado, I'll play a song as we head out here. And we got one more super chat. Are socialists feminists by default because women's liberation is linked to class struggle? I would say yes. Like, people say Engels is the first feminist. In Engels' Origins of the Family, Private Property, and the State, which we talked about today, and we could have talked about more.
Charles Fourier. That quote that people give, they attribute it to Engels, which is that you can measure the level of freedom of a society according to the standing of women. It's actually from Fourier, which of course Engels and Marx are pulling from. So it comes from the utopian socialist tradition.
There you go. So he was the first feminist, even though he thought that the oceans were going to turn into lemonade. That was still a good quote.
We actually have potentially at the end of the summer, we'll have a book from Mitchell K. Jones, who just told me about it today. He's hoping to get the work that he's done on utopian socialist communities and put it together in the form of a book. So that's very special because that tradition is in many ways a deeply American tradition, because a lot of those communities took place in America and they shaped the nation in many ways, and they were intermeshed with the abolitionist struggles and with the early labor struggles, and they bled into the socialist struggles. So it's a very important part of recapturing our history, showing how quite literally modern utopian communism, utopian socialism is rooted in the experiments that were done here in the US, all over the country.
Absolutely. All right. Well, here's the outro song that I picked out. A little bit different than our past ones, but I hope you all enjoy this. Thanks for being with us today.
Oh